First of all, thank you very much for registering this AngularJS webinar. And before we go into the session, let me introduce myself. I'm Dinesh and I have nearly 10 years of experience in JavaScript technologies like AngularJS, Node.js, Ember, Backbone, and React. So normally my day-to-day work is building AngularJS components or normal JavaScript modules. I'll be giving to my team so the team can integrate it with the applications. This is my just day-to-day work. This is overall about me. Next one is before we go into the session, just if you guys have any other questions regarding any modules in this AngularJS, please post your questions on this question window. Once I complete a particular module, I will be able to answer for your questions. Because in between, if I answer for your questions, I may able to navigate from one topic to next topic, so we can't complete whatever we targeted today. That's why. So whenever you are getting a question, please post your questions on the question window. Once I complete a particular module, I will be able to answer for your questions. Thank you. So let's go to our session. First, today in this webinar, we are going to discuss about AngularJS Heroic JavaScript MVW framework. Okay. Then what is the objectives we have in our today's webinar? First one will be learn about why should we use AngularJS, because we have a lot of frameworks out there in our market like Ember, Backbone. Otherwise, we have a normal library like jQuery. We have these many things. Then why do we need to learn AngularJS? Then what is AngularJS? So what are the things we have it in the AngularJS and other stuff we'll be discussing. Next one is we'll be discussing about MVC and MVW architecture and JavaScript. Because before 1 or 2 years back, normally we'll be using this MVC framework on all the server side components. Like whenever we use a Java or .NET projects, we'll be using this MVC. But why do we need to use this MVC on the client side? Next one is we'll be discussing about some of the AngularJS features like scope, two-way binding, then dependency injection, custom directives and other stuff. At last, we'll be building a responsive single page application with AngularJS on top of Node server. This is what our today's objective. Why AngularJS? First one is like 5 years back or like 6 7 years back. So what happened is mostly if they are viewing the website, they will view it only in the system like a normal system browsers. That will be with the standard screen size of 15 or 17 inches. That's it. But now if you see, there are a lot of devices are there in market. They can view it in the normal laptop or like bigger screen like 21 inches screen system or mobile tablet, whatever. So whenever we build the application, that should work on all the devices. So we should not say like, okay, I build this application, it will work only on this particular machine or only on this particular resolution. So that is a bad programming. So we have, so whenever we build an application, so this JavaScript application will be running on the client machine. If it is a server side component, so if you are building like a Java or .NET or Node application, it will be running on our server. So whenever user access, that will be always in the server. But this client side code, it has to render on the client device. It can be anything. So they can open our website or project in a normal mobile phone or a tablet or a laptop. So it has to render over there. So that is the biggest challenge we have in our current scenario. Next one is diverse user preference. Some people what they need is just they don't want to see the data in a same format. Somebody want to see the data in a good graphical manner. So if it takes more time also, that doesn't matter, but present it in the good graphical manner. Otherwise, some people just wanted to see the data in the tabular format. I am more comfortable with the table. In the same way, each and every user have their own preferences. So we have to satisfy all the users. That is also one more challenge we have on the client side. Next one is agility to the server new request. Each and every time we make a server request, it has to re-render the whole page. That will be really costly. If I want to make a small change on the client side, I have to make a call to the server will re-render the whole application. That will affect the performance. This is also one of the another challenge. Last one is multiple skill sets. So when we want to build application, we need one guy to build all the scripting, HTML, CSS, and another one guy for server, database, everything. This is also, we have to get multiple skill set people. If I want to build one basic application, so I have to look for one designer, visualization, and client side programmer, server side programmer, and DB guy. So we are having, these are all the very major problem on the web development. How can we solve it? Here we have our superheroic framework AngularJS, which solves almost everything. First one is responsiveness. Whenever we build a client-side programming with AngularJS framework, what happens is it can render on any device. That doesn't matter. So if you are making any mobile application, that also doesn't matter. So you can build an application with AngularJS. It can run on the mobile. It can run on the mobile browser as well as it can run as a mobile app. So it solves all this responsiveness with different devices. Next one is diverse user preference. So if user want to see the data in multiple places or multiple ways, so using the AngularJS, we can easily render a data with user preference. We can create kind of custom directives, whatever user wanted to see, just we can pass the data to the directive, it will render it accordingly. Next one is agility to server new requests. So here in AngularJS, we never reload the whole page. Whenever we make a change in the servers, automatically we'll be just giving the data back to the controller. Controller will render the page. It won't reload the whole page, just it will re-render the scope. That is one more small bug, or what we can say, improvement they need to do it in AngularJS. That also will be done on the Angular 2. The trouble is now, whenever we update a small scope in the controller side, it will update all the scope variables available in the AngularJS. But in the React.js, it is not. So whenever we update a particular scope, so automatically only it will update only that particular changed content. It won't update the whole scope. That also will be done in our Angular 2.0. Next one is multiple skill set. Mostly you guys know we can build a end-to-end application with only one language called JavaScript. So if you are using a Node.js on the server and MongoDB as a DB, everywhere JavaScript can run. So we'll be building our UI with AngularJS, that also JavaScript. Next one is the server Node.js, will build it with JavaScript. Next MongoDB also can run JavaScript. So we can build a end-to-end application with only one skill set called JavaScript. So it almost solves all these web challenges whatever we have in our life. Next one is, what is AngularJS? First, whoever starts learning this AngularJS, they are getting confused whether it is a library or a framework, right? So because before they start learning this AngularJS, mostly they will be having an experience on jQuery or normal JavaScript libraries. So they are thinking, okay, this is also one more library. So I have some set of functionalities, just I can use it. First, we have to understand the difference between a library and a framework. So library will be having a set of functionalities for a specific problem. So we can use that library to solve only some specific problem. That's it. But a framework is nothing but you can build a project on top of it, which specify the rule set for you. Okay, so this needs to happen like this. This has to work in this particular way. So framework defines the rule. We have to follow the rule to build app. So whenever we follow a particular framework, so what happens is it gives a clear cut picture for all the developers. So now, as if I'm not at all following any other framework, so what will happen is today I will be defining my controller here and there, I will be doing these stuffs. Later, if some other developer wanted to maintain my code, that will be very difficult for them. So they won't be knowing the flow. Okay, what is happening? How can I make a changes over here? Those are all the troubles we have. So instead, whenever we use any frameworks like Angular, Ember or Backbone, it is defining a flow. It's defining a rule. Okay, it has to work like this. It is not only having only set of functionalities. It is solving our all problems. That is the major difference between a framework and a library. Next one, okay. What is AngularJS? So AngularJS actually originally built by Misko Hevery, and later what happens is Google taken this project and Google developers are continually building this AngularJS. So it is a open source client-side JavaScript framework. If you are thinking just it is not only the framework. Okay, so whenever we wanted to build anything, if you want to build some kind of new elements, everything you can build with this AngularJS. So whoever wants to have a more control on the UI side, before in the traditional web application, what we will be doing is just we will be getting a data from the user, will give it to the server, nothing else. So each and every small business operation also, you have to send the data to the server, server will do it, then again will be re-rendering the whole page. There was no control on the UI. Everything is controlled by the server. But so because of that, what will happen is each and every request is costly. So it will degrade the performance. Now, if I want to make a small change, I will be doing all the operations in the client side itself. Just I will re-render it. I won't be refreshing the full page. Just I will re-render that scope. So you can control everything on the UI side. Almost all the code you can control it on the UI side. Next one is it is not that much complex also. So whenever you wanted to build, you can build all this AngularJS stuff. It is similar to normal JavaScript and HTML. If you look into it, all these directives and other things, whatever we have, it will be really similar to our normal HTML and JavaScript. For a click functionality, we have something like ng click. It's normal in JavaScript, we'll be using on click or something. In the same way, we'll be creating our ng click. It is really similar to HTML syntax and JavaScript, so we can learn easily. This is one more biggest advantage of AngularJS. Next one is the inventor of AngularJS, the Misko Hevery. So what he is telling us, it is we should not think this AngularJS is just a framework. So using this AngularJS, we can create our own element. So we have one more beautiful feature in AngularJS called custom directives. Using the custom directives, what we can do is you can build your own elements which will be having some kind of functionality and the look and feel. Now, in the normal HTML, you have something called input, like input type equal to text. Whenever you give this input type equal to text, the browser is rendering as a text box. So browser is having a template. Okay, it has to show like this on the browser. In the same way, you can create your own element. For example, I need to create some kind of button whenever I mouse over something needs to happen, and it should have some kind of functionalities. So you can build everything on AngularJS using one feature called custom directives. So that will be your own element. You can add a style, functionality, everything to it. So we are creating our own element. However, this JavaScript defined some for this tags and other stuff. That is possible in AngularJS. Next one is who are all using this AngularJS? First, YouTube. Of course, the AngularJS is developed by Google, so mostly Google's products are using AngularJS application in their products. So YouTube, PlayStation 3, they are using AngularJS in their project. Next one is the famous website, the Paytm, Netflix, and Freelancer, the Weather Channel. These guys are using AngularJS in their projects. So if you want to know how they are using AngularJS and other stuff, just open their code and view source, or you can open it in the developer tool, so you can see what are all the functionalities they are using it in their project. Okay, just if you open, so you can see it over here in the normal Chrome browser, press F12, it will open the developer tool. You can see it, all the code, all the JavaScript code will be available on the source tab, and normal HTML will be available right here. You can take a look. Next one is, let's see what is the single page application. So whenever we start up any frameworks, the new frameworks, they are saying that is a single page application. What does it mean by single page application? Single page application is nothing but we'll be having the routing and rendering on the client side. That is mainly we are calling it as a single page application. What does it mean by routing and rendering? Now, currently consider I have four tabs in our application like home, settings, contacts and other things. Whenever I click on the contact tab, just I want to load this contacts HTML. And if I click on the some other tab, just I want to load the another HTML. Normally, in our traditional way, what we will be doing? Whenever you click on this, we'll make a server call. Server will redirect it to another page. We'll be reloading the whole HTML. Instead, we'll be handling it in our client side itself. In AngularJS, we have one concept called router. We can use ng route or UI route module in your application, which handles all the routing in the client side itself. So whenever you just navigate to the another tab, it will check for your URL. Because of the URL change, it will load a particular template and controller in your system. So we won't be making any other server side call to render or navigation of these pages. That is one of the best advantage. Next one is client side rendering. So as I told before, if you want to make some small changes in your HTML, so if you want to do some kind of calculations, normally we'll make a call to the server, server will give the data, again we'll be re-rendering. Instead of that, we'll be using the scopes. The scopes are like a two-way binding. That's one more concept. We'll be discussing that. So you, because of that, whenever you are making a changes in your controller will watch the scope and it updates all the changed value in your view. So these are all the main things you have to see it in the single page application. Okay. Next one is here in the diagram you can see. So what are all the layers normally we have in our application? First one is web UI layer and another one is the data service layer. So in the web UI layer is nothing but you will be having your normal HTML CSS. It is this is what we are calling it as a view. Next one is this application layer. So here we will be having some kind of JavaScript code to write all the business logics. Next one is you'll be having the navigation APIs. So if you want to navigate from here to there, all the routing concept will be mentioned it on this API. Next one is data access layer. Everything will work on only the client side. So in the data access layer is nothing but we'll be exposing all the REST APIs in our server. If you want to consume those REST APIs, we'll be creating one layer that is called data access layer. We'll make a call to those REST APIs. From this data access layer, we'll be getting the data. So I got all the data. If you are feeling this data always will be same. So next time you don't want to make a call to the REST API layer to get the data. Other time what we can do is we can use this local storage functionality of HTML5. So we need not to use the exact native application of HTML5. In AngularJS itself, we have the option to store the data in our local storage. So we can use the functionality to store the data in local storage using this AngularJS. Next, responsive single application. So we discussed this one also in the first slide. Normally, whenever you build an application with AngularJS, you can view the same application in all the devices. Here, just I want to tell the difference between the CSS responsiveness and the JavaScript. Normally, whenever we say it as a responsive designing, so what they think, okay, I can use some kind of CSS framework, so it will be rendered on all the application. Okay, that is only for the view part. The functionality we have, we are going to write all this client-side functionalities in the JavaScript. That also needs to work on the application. So we have to think, okay, whether it works or not. So whenever we build these functionalities with AngularJS, it will work on all the devices. There is two types of responsive designing. One is you have to worry for the view. Next one is you have to worry for the functionalities. So for the view, you can use CSS frameworks like Bootstrap or Foundation. We have a number of responsive CSS. You can use anything, any of this. For scripting side, we can go for AngularJS or Backbone, Ember. We can use any of these kind of frameworks to render all the pages. Next, AngularJS in detail. So let's see what we have. Okay, so before we go into this MVC and MVW architecture, if you guys have any other questions, please post your questions. Let's spend 5 minutes. I will be answering for your question. Next, we can continue this module. So Vinod Reddy is asking, is it possible to send it slideshow or a video recording? Yes, Vinod. So this slideshow and this video recording will be available in our website, that is Edureka. In the end of the session, we will be giving you the link. Mostly tomorrow you can get this video. From Anish Aravind, we have a question. Which is faster, Knockout.js or AngularJS? So actually, if you see, currently this AngularJS 1.4 and Knockout.js are really similar. So they are having a two-way, same kind of two-way binding. When they release the Angular 2.0, it will be definitely faster than the Knockout.js. But currently, almost both are same. But one advantage is here we have more features over this Knockout.js in Angular. From Hiran Joshi have a question. How much secure AngularJS as its client side? So whenever we talk about the security purpose, so what we can do is we can use some kind of JavaScript libraries to encode all the REST APIs. So whenever only hackers can hack our application, when we send any other thing to the server side or whenever we handles the data in the client. So what you can do is whenever you send the data to the server or server to client, we can use any kind of encryption algorithm. So which encrypts the data and sends to the client side. In the client side again we can decrypt it and you can use it, assign it for your scope. That will give more secure in your client side. So Ajay is asking scope reloading feature in Angular 2.0. Normally, now in AngularJS, whenever you update one scope variable, what it will do is it will just re-render the whole scope. For example, I have one controller. The controller is having like a 10 scope variables. So I'm just making only change in one scope. Now all these 10 scope variables will be updated. This is what is happening in the Angular 1.2. If you see the React.js, in the React.js, whenever you make a change, it will identify where that change happened and only it will update that particular part. In the same way, in AngularJS also, they are making AngularJS 2.2 also, they are making a change. So whenever you make a change in a particular scope variable, it re-render or it updates only that particular scope, not the whole scope. That is what the scope reloading in Angular 2.2. From Rajit Kumar, we have a question. What is the difference between Node.js and AngularJS? So you can't compare Node.js and AngularJS. Node.js is for a server side and AngularJS is for a client side. So however, we have a Java and a JSP, right? So JSP is a Java server pages. So we'll be writing whatever needs to be rendered on the client side, you are writing on the JSP. All the core concept and business logic, whatever needs to be rendered, compiled on the server, that we are writing in the Java. In the same way, whatever needs to be run on the server, we will be writing it in using the Node.js. And if you want to run it on the client side, that is on the browser, you will be writing using Angular. So you can't compare these two. From Shivakumar, we have a question. Can you come again with the difference between Bootstrap and AngularJS responsive functionality? So the responsive functionality is nothing but there is two kind. One is I have to check for CSS responsiveness. So whenever you build a web page, you have to see the page in all kind of devices without breaking. Now we are worrying only about the view part. If I make a change anything over there, so everything I need to see without zooming it, and everything should be proper. I don't need, should not get any X scrolls. Okay, this is the CSS part. And in the AngularJS, we'll be worrying all the functionalities work or not. Okay, whenever we build some kind of application, so if you are using the word Flash and other stuff, it won't be supported on the mobile. It will cause some trouble on some other browsers also. So when we build with AngularJS, we can give the same kind of animations, however we give it with the Flash, and the functionality also works fine with in all the devices. That is the difference between the Bootstrap responsiveness and the AngularJS. So from Praveen, we have a question. To learn AngularJS, how much person should have a knowledge on JavaScript? If you have a very basic knowledge in JavaScript, that's more than enough to learn AngularJS. It is really similar. It's similar to JavaScript and normal HTML syntaxes. From Ankit, we have a question. Any chart API provided by AngularJS? There is no chart API provided by AngularJS, but if you are using NVD3 and other stuff, they built charting library on top of AngularJS and D3. It is free. So you can take and you can use it in your projects. But it is not exactly built by the AngularJS guys. It is built on top of AngularJS using the D3JS library. Okay, let's take a last one question. From Anish, we have a question. Is AngularJS 2.0 is totally different from the present version? It is not totally different from the present version. So now also, so for example, if you are saying this is totally different from the current version, no one used this Angular 1.4 because once they release it, again they have to migrate from 1.x to 2.0. That is not possible. They never built any application like that. So now itself there are some ways you can build an application in that certain way. So it will be really easy to migrate to 2.0. Now there is a concept called controllers in AngularJS. That won't be there in 2.0. Instead of that, we will be making each and every component as a directives. So how we are building it in React. In the same way, we will be building each and every component with the custom directives. So you can plug those components in HTML. In the same way, we will be doing it in the Angular 2.2 also. That is the major difference in Angular 2.2 and 1.x. Okay, so let's go into the webinar again. Once we complete the next module, I will be able to answer for your questions. And because of the shortage of time, I'm not able to answer for your question. Anyway, you can send these questions to our support team and we should be able to answer for all of these questions. Let's continue. Next, now we are going to discuss about MVC and MVW way of AngularJS. First, what does it mean by MVC? MVC nothing but first M stands for model, V stands for view and C stands for controller. So normally model is nothing but whatever data you are handling on your client side. That is what we are calling it as a model. So I have a server and from the server I will be getting all the user information. So I have one table in the view table in the HTML, right? Just I want to plot all this user information in this HTML. So I will make a HTTP request to the server side and I can get all this data. I mostly will be getting the data as a JSON object. So we will keep all this JSON object in our client side. Okay, this is what we are calling it as a model, and we can play around with this data. Next one is view. So view is nothing but it is just a presentation layer. So whatever you want to present to the UI or user. Okay, so you got the data and you need to show the data to the user. That is what we are calling it as a view. We will be writing some basic HTML and CSS on the view. Next one is controller. So which controls the flow. So whenever you are making a change, you have the model. So whenever you are making the change in the model, so we'll be having one service called $watch, which watches this model and the view. So it will trigger whenever a change happens on the model, it will trigger an event saying, okay, change happened on this model. So make a change it in the view. So it will re-render the view. Just it will update those particular scope. In the same way, if any change happens in the view, the watch triggers and it updates the model. So which controls everything. Next, if you want to write all the business logic validation, we will be writing everything on the controller part. This is what the normal MVC architecture in any framework. It is not only in AngularJS, it is the same in any framework. But if you see it in the AngularJS website, they are saying it is MVW. What does it mean by MVW? So you can see like Ember.js or Knockout.js, if you see, they will mention it as a MVVM, model view, view model. Or here some people will be saying as MVC. And here in AngularJS, they are saying it as a MVW. What does it mean by MVW? So MVW is nothing but model view, whatever. So you can call it whatever. So you'll be having a controller, directive, unit test cases, and the trouble, one more big conversation you can see it in online. So some people are saying the AngularJS is corresponding to MVVM, and some other people are saying it is corresponding to MVC. So VM is nothing but the view model. So because the view and model is tightly coupled in AngularJS, so whenever we make a change in our model, automatically view is getting changed, and whenever I make a change in the view, the model is getting changed. So that's why they are calling it as a view model. And people are calling some group is calling like a MVC. So the debate is still going on. But now if you see the AngularJS website, they are saying it is just whatever you can, whatever you want to call, just call it. You can call it as a model, view, controller, directive, unit test cases. You can call whatever you want. That's why they made it as a MVW framework. Next, what are all the features we have it in AngularJS? Here we are not going to compare any of the features with Ember or Knockout, just we are going to discuss only about the AngularJS features. So mainly, the important feature of AngularJS is two-way binding. So what we discussed, if I make a change in the view, the model is getting updated automatically. In the same way, if I make a change in the model, view is getting updated. This is what we are calling it as a two-way binding. Okay, this is one of the best feature of AngularJS. Next one is custom directives. So now if I want to make any other functionalities, and I will be reusing the same functionality all over the application. So I can make it as a custom directive. Just I will pass the data from my controller to the directive. I can achieve all the functionalities whatever I wanted. That is really simple. Next one is dependency injection. This is one of the nice feature. So dependency injection is nothing but, so I have some kind of modules over there. If I want to include it in my application, what we'll be doing is just we'll include that script file. So I should be able to access all the functionalities. That is only for the DOM manipulation. Here we are not at all doing any other DOM manipulation. It's full and full data manipulation in AngularJS. Okay. Now, if you are including any other module, you have to include it as a dependency. You have to say, tell to this AngularJS controller or the module, okay, I have included this application, or I have included this particular module as a dependent module for the next one module. So I can have two different modules. So one will handle all the user kind of scenarios, and another module will handle all the admin kind of scenarios. So I will make one project. I will inject these two modules as a dependency for this full project. So whatever functionalities I have it in those two modules, I should be able to access it in my project. Okay, this is what we are calling it as a dependency injections. Except this, we have more features like expressions, services, filters, routings, and other stuff. Mostly the main features, if you ask me, I'll be saying this: data binding, custom directives, dependency injections, and routings. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. How to build a responsive single page application using AngularJS. Till now we were discussing about all the theoretical part. It might be boring. So let's go to the programming. First, if you want to build your first AngularJS application, what do we need to do? Get a AngularJS file from the internet. You can use the CDN or normal the static file. But if you are going to deploy your application, better you can use the CDN. That will give a more performance. So CDN is nothing but there will be having many points. So whenever you launch your application, first it will check where is the closest point. From the closest point, it will get the file and it will serve it. Obviously, if you have the static file, always it will get it from your server. It will serve it in the browser. So instead, you can use CDNs in the your production ready environments. Next one is bootstrapping the app. So how can we do it? First, we will be including the script file. Next, you have to mention this application is an AngularJS application. For that, we have one directory called ng app. So once you include that script, that AngularJS script, so it will check for this ng app directive. If it finds this ng app directive in your HTML, then only it will decide, okay, from this place onwards or from this div onwards, my application starts. This is what the AngularJS application. So whatever I have inside, I have to render it as AngularJS. So automatically that will decide. If you are including your ng app in the HTML itself, the whole HTML will be considered as your AngularJS application. So we should be able to make use of it. Okay. Now let's go for the program. So before we go into the program, do you guys have any other questions regarding MVC or AngularJS features? If yes, please post your questions on the question window. Let's spend 5 minutes for these questions. Next we can go for the program. Okay. So first question we got from Rugesh. How can we make SEO friendly AngularJS single page application? So SEO friendly is nothing. You have to consider some kind of HTML features like. So you can Google for this SEO. First one is You have to give all these keywords in your meta tag. Next one is you have to write this application in the current way how they mentioned in the SEO. For example, all this H1, the bigger text, so it should be on the top. So all the next one, the smaller text H2, H3 and other things in the same order. Okay, these are all set of rules they specified in the SEO. That is nothing, nothing. They didn't mention anything about the AngularJS. It is all about this HTML5 standards. So you need not to worry about AngularJS on this SEO. So from Amit is having a question, how much time one needs to learn AngularJS? It depends on that particular person, and so if that particular guy is having like strong knowledge in JavaScript, in my mind it won't take more than 2 months. So if you get a proper guidance, you will be able to read this AngularJS within a month or two, not more than that. From Ajay, we have a question. What is the difference between $watch and $apply? So these are all the two functionalities available in AngularJS. So $watch is nothing but so it will watch for a change. I have a model kind like name. Okay, whenever change happens on that name, I want to watch. Need to make trigger a event. So on this watch, I will pass the scope. So whatever scope you passed on this watch functionality, it will watch. Whenever change happens on the scope, it will trigger a function. So whatever functionality you want to write, you can write inside. Apply is nothing but sometimes I will make a change in the model. It won't be reflected in the view. So at that time, you have to manually trigger this apply functionality to update your view. That's why we'll be using $apply. Watch is to just watch for the, if any change happens, watch that. That's why we have a watch. Apply is nothing but whenever I make a change in the model, sometimes it won't get reflect on the view. So manually trigger this $apply to update it. So if you ask me when it will happen is, instead of using any JavaScript functionalities, if I use kind of jQuery or any other JavaScript function to do some kind of operation to change this model, at the time the $watch won't get triggered. So we are making a change from some other language, not from the AngularJS. So AngularJS doesn't understand, okay, the change happened. So manually you have to trigger this apply. So you have to tell this AngularJS, okay, change happened. Again, apply this change in your view. Okay, that time we'll use $apply. From Ajay Singh, we have a question. Can you explain $digest? Yeah, sure. So in the $digest, so this $apply, watch, digest, these are all little bit depth concept. Anyway, I will just give a overview about it. In the $digest, what will happen is whenever you make a change, automatically this $watch triggers this digest event. This will happen internally. So the digest event internally calls the apply to update all the scope. So now some people you can see whenever you wanted to apply, they will call the digest cycle. Okay, I need not to apply, just call the digest cycle. So internally the digest cycle calls the apply. That's it. So before this apply, we will be having this digest cycle to trigger it. From Dharam Singh, we have a question. Can we use AngularJS for multiple page application? The whole application can use AngularJS. Exactly. So you can declare one AngularJS app. Inside that app, you can have a route configuration. Using the route configuration, we can load multiple HTML pages. That is possible. That we can achieve using AngularJS router. From Sumant, we have a question. How it is different from jQuery? jQuery is just a library which is having set of functionalities. Here, the AngularJS is a framework which defines a way and rule, and you can build a project on top of it. Right? This is a very huge difference. jQuery is just library. It is for a specific problem, whatever we have to solve it. So they build one JavaScript library on top of JavaScript layer. So easily we can call all the functionalities. For example, if I want to bind some event on a class or ID in JavaScript, we have to write like a document.click or something, right? Instead of that, they built one layer on top of the JavaScript. So you can call it like a dollar of something.click. That's it. This is for just to create a layer on top of JavaScript. Now the AngularJS is a framework, so you can have a way, okay, this is how we have to build everything, and this is having a lot more feature than jQuery. So we can't compare this jQuery and AngularJS. From Ranjit Patel, we have a question. What is AngularJS routing and how can we use it? AngularJS routing is nothing but whenever we want to navigate from one page to another page. So before in the traditional application, what we'll be doing is, whenever you click on this anchor tag, we'll make a call to the server. Server will redirect to the another HTML. So the HTML will be re-rendered in our page. But now here we'll be having one view, just one container will mention if I make any other change, it will watch for your URL. So in the URL, if any change happens, it will load the data in your HTML view. That's what will happen. This is what will happen in your AngularJS routing. Okay, so let's go to the programming. Then at last, if you have a time, I will be able to answer for remaining questions, guys. Okay, so let's go for programs. You can see it over here. I don't have anything else than this AngularJS file. So it is just I have downloaded the latest version of AngularJS 5 from this AngularJS page. So I will be using it for this example. So let me create a basic HTML file right here, normal. I'm going to call it as index.html. Right, you can see I have just the empty HTML file, HTML file. It's a Sublime editor. Do you guys see the screen? Is that font visible? Or do you want me to increase the font size? Is it visible? Shall I increase the font size? Yeah, great. So I'll keep the font size as such. Let's start. Now, as I told, if we want to start this AngularJS application, how can we do? First, we have to include the AngularJS script file. So for the good practice, don't include any script file in the head, so it will affect the performance. So we have to include all the script file in the bottom of your HTML page. So I'm going to include a script. Source angular.js. Next one is whenever I include this AngularJS, so what it will do, it will search for ng app directive. Once it finds the ng app directive, it will tell to the browser, okay, the whole content whatever I have right here, everything is a AngularJS. So render all these elements as an Angular element. So we have to make this ng app. Okay, now I'm going to give this ng app in the HTML. So all the whole HTML will be considered as a AngularJS. So if I give it in the body, whatever I define inside this body, only this will be considered as a AngularJS. I don't want that. I want to consider the whole application as Angular. So I'm going to include ng app right here. Okay, now I have included my ng app. Next, what I want to do is I wanted to give a name for this app. So only I can create an Angular app, so I will be able to use it. So without the ng app name also it will work, but I can create it as a normal basic application. But if you want to create a proper application, just give a name for this app. So I'm going to give the name as demo. Okay, this is fine. Next, I want to write all the configuration for this app. How can I do that? So let me create a new file. I'm going to save it as custom.js. Okay, let me include that file also in this HTML. Script custom.js. Okay, it is done. Next, what I want to do is first you have to declare your app. So where app equal to angular dot module of whatever app name you define in your HTML. So here I define my app name as demo. So your module name is demo. And if you want to pass any dependencies to the application, okay, I have another one application as a dependency, just you can pass the dependencies. But now I don't want to pass any dependencies, so I'm just giving as an empty brackets. Okay, now I have defined my apps. Okay, so let's go over here. Let's try some of the basic things. Whenever in JavaScript, normal HTML, if I do this, let me make it as h1 tag so it will be visible. 1 plus 1. What will happen? So whenever I run this program in browser, you can see it over here. Whenever I run this program, it is just giving 1 plus 1. Normally, this is what will happen in HTML. It won't render anything. Whatever I have in the HTML, just it will display it on the browser. But I want to have some kind of functionality where it can render itself, right? So in AngularJS, we have one feature called expressions. Using those expressions, we should be able to render this AngularJS or JavaScript functionality, and we can show the result over there. So let's go to the code, and instead of giving 1 plus 1, I'm going to mark it as a expressions. So if you want to give it as an expression, it is nothing but just give these two flower braces. So whatever you are giving inside these flower braces, everything will be compiled, or what do you say? Everything will be considered as an AngularJS module, so which will be executed on this. So if I'm giving some kind of AngularJS scope name, so which will be executed and gives the result. Now I am giving 1 plus 1, which executed, it will give 2 on the HTML. So the 2 will be printed right there. So this is how we can use AngularJS expressions. Okay, now this is fine. But if I want to create a controller and if you want to use it, how can I do? So right here will give you the proper way to create the controller. You can see many people creates the controller in this way. App.controller. Just they will give some controller name. Test CTRL, which will be having a function. So just you can mention whatever you want. So pass the scope as a $scope as a dependency to this controller, and $scope dot name equal to whatever name you want to give. Okay, Edureka. Now if I want to use this controller in the HTML, what do we do? Just I'm going to create one more div. I don't want this h1 tag, so I'll be removing it. So inside the div, I'm going to map the controller. Ng controller equal to test CTRO. That's it. Now if I want to print the name, just in the expressions I will give name. So the name is mapped over here as Edureka, and I'm not at all writing anything. In the jQuery, you have to get the name and bind it to a particular element, or just the dot text you have to get the value. So instead, everything will work as a two-way binding in AngularJS. Just I am defining it as a scope, and the scope will be rendered right here, and it can give the result in HTML. So let's see what happens. Now whenever I refresh the page, I am getting the result as Edureka. It worked fine. So but this is not a correct way to define a controller. So instead, how you need to define a controller is, first give your controller name. Next, here give a square braces and give function, and whatever dependencies you have, you can give the dependency full name right here. For example, if I have created one service as a dependency to the controller, or I have to inject that service in this controller. So I'm going to call the service as test service. So you have passed the test service, and you have to give the same test service here. Why we are giving in the two places? Whenever you are compressing your app using some kind of two task runners like a grunt or gull, so this is your original service name. Here, instead of having, so if you want to use the same service name in your controller, the test service dot the functionality or the variable will be accessing it. So instead of using this much big service name, what it will do, it will make it as a small, it will call just as a T. So you can access the functionality with T dot something. So because of converting like this, it will reduce the page size. So whenever you declare your controller, declare it in this particular way. Don't declare it just normal the scope. Okay, now I'm going to delete this. I don't have any service, so I need not to include. Next one is what you can do. You can directly give the function, otherwise create one function name. I'm going to call it as test CTRL. Then you can define a function right here. Function test CTRL. So whatever dependencies you have, you can pass it to the function, and we should be able to access it. Next one is, in the last example we were seeing this dollar scope. Here don't use any dollar scope. So each and every controller will be having its own instance. So how can you access the instance in Java? Normally we'll be using access the instance using this. In the same way, you should be able to access this instance. Now if you want to access the instance, this dot name equal to Edureka. Okay, now it is done. Next, one more approach we have. Instead of giving the direct controller name right here, give it as an alias name. Because sometimes we will be using the nested controllers. In nested controllers, if you want to know which is my parent controller data and which is the child controller data, because I may use the same scope variable in my parent and child. So we have to differentiate it, right? So instead of just using the controller name, what can we do is use the alias name. So the test controller as I'm going to call it as a TC. Just whatever you want to call, you can mention it over there. So if you for a naming convention and to make it smaller, I'm just going to call it as a TC. Next, if you want to access these functionalities or whatever scope I have on this TC controller, if you want to access, I will be accessing like TC dot name. Now let me refresh this page, so I'll be able to get the same result. So in the last way or this way will be result will be same, but whenever we want to manage the application, it is the best way to define it. So define all your controllers with alias name. Next, whenever you define the controller, use these flower braces, all pass the dependencies on top of it here. So if you want to use the $HTTP, so what I'll be using, I'll be passing the $HTTP here. Next, I can use the $HTTP. In the programming, I can use the same $HTTP, but whenever I deploy the application in the production environment using some kind of grunt task runner, I will change this $HTTP to. So if I want to use the $HTTP in the application, what I will be doing is $HTTP of whatever the method something. Okay, so method is get and URL is some URL. Okay, I have this particular method. Instead of using like this in the development environment, production environment, I will change this to just H. So instead of writing this much big text, I can make it as a H of method get URL and this one. So whenever I'm doing like this, it will reduce the page size. Because in a production environment, we are not going to do any other debugging. So you can compress all the client side files, so it will improve the performance of your client app. Now this is how we'll be passing normal dependencies to the controller in this new way. So I'm going to mark it as a $HTTP. Okay. Now we defined our controllers. What does it mean by two-way binding? So now just we have defined the controller and I have scope variable. I just executed the scope variable using the expressions and I'm getting the data. But I want to understand what does it mean by two-way binding. So let me explain that. Underneath that, I'm going to create one input type. So let me make it as a bigger tag h1. In the input type, I'm going to give ng model equal to tc.name. The same name whatever I have defined over there in the controller, I'm showing that name and I'm just accessing the same name using the ng model. So let me run this application quickly. Now whatever I have it in the text box, the same thing is displayed right here. If I make any other change right here, hello, so everything will be automatically updated. This is what we are calling it as a two-way binding in AngularJS. So mainly what happens is whenever I make a change, so I'm just making the change in the view. This is the text box, right? So I'm making a change in the view. Automatically the change has been watched by the $watch event available in the controller. So the controller is again updating the view. So whenever it updates the view, so here this is the view, automatically it is getting updated and we are getting the data. So the same thing if you want to do it in the jQuery, what you guys have to do is, whenever key up happens, you have to watch for the key up, write a functionality on the key up, get the data of the text box and bind it into the another HTML or particular div tag. Here it is nothing. So you can use the same variable multiple times. I'm going to create it one more time here also. tc.name. Okay, so it will be, we can display the name right there. So whenever I make a change, it will update all these variables. So just it updates the whole view. So I didn't write any code for it. Simply I created one scope variable and my controller. Just I gave the scope variable to the text box and in the view. Automatically this is getting reflected. Next one is you can write all the conditional statement in AngularJS in just view itself. How can I do that? So here I'm going to create one more tag, h1 tag, show only show if name is Edureka or Edureka. Okay, so I have written a condition. So now let's see first without any other case. Now I have this is show if name is Edureka. Now what I want to do is whenever the text box is having a name is Edureka, then I need to show. Otherwise I don't want to show this, just I want to hide this one. So for this what can we do is here in the h1 tag itself you can mention your control statement ng if whatever you mentioned tc.name equal to Edureka. Save. Let me rerun. Whenever I make a change on this, you can see that is gone. If it is Edureka, then only that will be visible. Otherwise it won't be visible, right? So instead of this, if I make it as a Edureka, that name, this block is displayed. Okay, in the same way we can write all the conditional statement in the HTML itself. We need not write a script for it. Okay, this is fine. In the same way, we can write a for loop also. If I have n number of data, if you want to repeat and show all the information, that is also possible. So here I am going to create one more UL li. Normally, if I want to show all the user information, consider I have 5 users. Li, first one is having Dinesh. Next, I have one more li having a test user. Third li having test user 1. So I have to write a HTML. Instead of that, I will be getting this user list from the backend as a JSON object, and I wanted to show everything on the UI. How can I do that? So it is really simple. So what we can do is, let me delete this. I'm going to create a scope variable in the controller. This dot users equal to array of, I can mention all the username. User 1. Let me copy paste it, it will be simple. User 2, 3 and 4. It's done. Now I mentioned it. I wanted to show this user on the screen. How can I show? So I have to create a li. So I have to loop through all this user data and I need to display it one by one. However, we are doing it in the for. So here what we have is we have one directive called ng repeat. Using the directive, pass the user object. The user object is users, right? So that's a scope variable. So tc.users. In the normally in JavaScript, if you want to use the for, we'll be using like a in users. So each and every object in the user array will pass to the a. You can do the operation on this. So in the same way, yours are in users, and you can print that user on the screen. Now what we are doing is just we are using this ng repeat to repeat this user object and print the information on the li. So let's refresh the tab. Let's see what happens on the scene. So whenever I give, so you can see it automatically it's showing all the users. Now if I make a change in this user list, I'm going to add one more user. user 5. I need not to touch the code. Automatically that will be rendered right here. So it is showing now the new user also, user 5. So these are all the basic functionalities available in AngularJS using controller. Now, what I want to do is, I already have a text box and I need to let me create a one more button. Button add user. So whatever user I have, whenever I click on the button, I want to add that user on this list. How can I do this? So here we have one more problem also, so I can explain that to you. So ng click, so here if click happens, we'll walk through ng click add user, tc dot add user. This is one more functionality. I'm creating one Angular functionality. So let me create one function here saying this dot add user equal to function of what do we need to do right here. You can do it on this. But the trouble is, if I use this inside a function, it will consider that this is an instance of your function variable. Now we'll be getting a confusion whether this is your controller instance or the function instance. This is the biggest trouble. How can we avoid it? So whenever you declare your controller, first create one variable where I'm going to call it as a tc equal to this. So you can assign this variable to tc. So instead of accessing this name using this, you can access it via tc. So tc.name, tc.users and tc.addUser. Now if you create this inside, that always refers to your function instance, not your controller instance. Okay. Now I got the add user function. Whenever I click, it will come to this add user. Now what I want to do is, whenever I add a click, I want to push the name over here. How can I do that? So tc.users.push whatever name. So the name will be available in this tc.name. tc.name. So it will be pushed over here on this array. So whenever the array gets updated, so automatically it re-render the view. So the list also gets updated. So let me refresh it. I'm going to add Edureka. It's added. Edureka 1. Enter. See, it is keep on getting added on this one. I'm not at all making any other change. Whenever I add on this, it will push it to the array. Whenever the array changes, that is the scope variable, so it updates the view. So we can make all these functionalities in AngularJS with very less amount of code and with less amount of time. Okay. So do you guys have any other question regarding these basic features? If yes, please post your questions on the question window. So from Ajay we have a question. Can I add a multiple controllers in a single module? Yeah, that is possible. You can have n number of controllers in a single module. So if time permits, I can show you that also, Ajay. So you can have a controller. If you want to share the data between controllers using the service or factory, we should be able to share the data between these controllers. From Pranab, we have a question. What is the difference between ng-show and ng-hide? Nice question, Pranab. I will show that to you. So whenever you wanted to see the difference between show and hide, just open your controllers tab, and in the elements you can see everything. Let me make it as Edureka, so it will display this. So let's take this element. You can see the element is available in DOM. Whenever I make a change, it won't satisfy the condition, so that element will be removed from the DOM itself. If you are using ng-if, the element will be totally removed from the DOM. If you are using ng-show, that will be available in the DOM, just it will hide it. Using the CSS, the DOM element will be hidden. Here if in the ng-if, it will be deleted from the DOM itself. That is the major difference between ng-if and ng-show. So from Ranjit Patel we have a question, how can we debug the ng repeat? Here you can't add any debugger. So normally how I used to debug is, I will be just printing the whole object over there. So each and every repeat it will print the object. With that object I should be able to get the data. That's how I will be debugging. So Rakesh, you have a question. Is NG app multiple? No, Rakesh, it can't be. You can't define multiple NG apps because whenever you define application or whenever you include this controller file, it will look for the NG app. So whenever it finds the first app, it will consider that is your NG app, or this is where your module starts. Okay, so you can have only one NG app in your application, but you can have a NG app within another app, but you can't have a parallel apps. That is also one more concern. So if you are having a multiple NG app, you can have it as a parent and child, not in the parallel way. That is not possible. So Vaibhav Sharma is having a question. Is an enterprise application, the index.html would be ideally be JSP if you are using struts, Spring, MVC. Please confirm. So it is nothing like normal standard or other things. Mostly everyone will be index.html. So if new people are new user or new developers are also coming to your project, it will be easy for them. Okay, mostly they will check the index.html. This is where the application starts. Okay, it is the practice. That's it. From Shivakumar, we have a question. What is the different DB that supports? You can't make a direct call to your DB from AngularJS. So anyway, you need one REST layer. From the REST layer only, you can have a call to the DB. So your AngularJS talks to the server, server talks to the DB. So there is you can't make a direct call from AngularJS. From Supriya, we have a question. Um, what is the difference between ng bind and ng model? So whenever you need to bind some data into the element, we'll be using ng bind. If you want to give the data to the input box or select box, these kind of things, so we'll be using ng model. So here in the div span, if you are giving, you can't make a change on it. Just you can show it. Instead, if you can change the data using the presentation layer, that is like input or select box or radio button. So those times we have to use ng model. So Ajay Singh is having a question. Can you explain the REST services? So REST services mostly we'll be doing it on the server side. It is nothing. We'll be creating a set of services. Whenever you want to update a particular data, it is like a functionality. Consider it is like a functionalities. You'll be able to call those function, get the data done, and get the response back from the REST layer, and you can update it in the UI. That is the basic thing about REST layer, but it is a very huge topic. Now we can't spend because it is now we are going to discuss only about the client side programming. From Vaibhav Sharma, we have a question: how to performance test single page application as one page load does all heavy lifting, and it would be difficult to test the widget refresh. It is not like that, Vaibhav Sharma. So what will happen is whatever is there in the current scope, only that will get load. So you can have like 70-80 pages in your application. Everything won't be loaded in a single call. What is there in your current scope, only that will be loaded. If you load everything in the browser, that's it, just it will crash the browser. Okay, so if you want to just consider in this way, I have a view. So in the view I have mentioned like I need to load the home HTML and home controller, but I can have a number of other pages also. So what it will do, it will load only the home HTML and home controller over there, so remaining pages will be available outside. So it will load it in this way only in the AngularJS. So Vinod Reddy is asking, is it possible to have a use multiple ng controllers? Yes, that is possible, Vinod. Anyway, I will show a small example for having a multiple controllers in AngularJS. So next we can go for the real-time application, that is a building a responsive application using Angular. So let's go back to the example. Here what I am going to do, I will be defining a one more controller, app.controller test ctrl2, and I don't need any dependency, and I'm going to create a function test2. So function test2, it's not having any dependency here, where t2 equal to this. So I'm assigning the instance to t2. Now t2 dot name equal to hello. Next, here I'm going to create a controller of, in the second controller, it is a parallel controller, sibling controllers. These are not parent child, it's a sibling controllers. Div ng controller equal to whatever controller name I have given, just I have to pass the same controller name as t2, and I can print the t2 dot name. Let's go and refresh. So it will show till this area, this is controller 1, and from here onward this will be controller 2. Now here also I have the same name scope variable, here also the same name scope variable, but this comes under the controller 1 scope, and this one hello is comes under controller 2 scope. This is how we can have an n number of controllers in AngularJS. It can be a sibling controller, or it can be a parent child controllers also. From Rakesh, we have a question. Instead of hard coding the user 1, 2, 3, 4, can we get it from dynamically from DB? That is also possible. I will show an example for that, Rakesh, in few minutes. Let's take a last question. We have a last question from Supriya. What is state providers? So it's not a state route providers, it's state providers. So state providers is nothing but whenever we use the UI router in AngularJS applications, we'll be using this state providers as a provider. Using the state provider, you can configure your route for your application. State provider is nothing but if you want to configure your routes, we'll be using this state providers. Okay, so let's go to the real-time application using AngularJS. Already I built the application. I will demo it to you guys and I will explain you the code. I'm going, let me get the application. I built one application with AngularJS and server as a node. Now we mostly will be discussing only the client side part, that is the AngularJS. So if you see, I have Bower components like Angular, Angular UI router, Bootstrap, jQuery, and other files. First, if you see the index.html, I have all the files available right here. So whatever the JavaScript file I am going to use it in the application, I mentioned all the files. Next, as we discussed, all the application will start from ng app. So ng app I defined as a user management. Next, what I am doing is, once the app is loaded, it will check for this particular file. In the file, I created the module user management and I created the configuration file. So whenever I load the page, this is how it has to work. If I open a login page, it has to load this login.html template as my view, and this template should have this as my controller. In the same way, if I open a home page, I need to load this home.html inside my view and home controller should be there. Okay, this is fine. So how can we mention it? So in the index.html, you can see we have one placeholder called UI view. So inside the UI view, depends on your browser URL, all the data will be loaded inside this UI view. So we should be able to display those information. So let's go one by one. First, let me open it in the terminal. Before I run this application, I need to start my DB, because without DB, if I start the node server, it will throw error. So let me start my MongoDB. Okay, now my MongoDB has been started. Let me start my node server now. I have this node server on D. Okay, now my node server has been started. It's listening to port number 3000. Let me go over here. Let's launch that. Localhost colon 3000. Now, whenever I type this localhost 3000, the URL become slash login. So it will go to the configuration. In the configuration, oh man, right? Let me close all other pages, whatever I have. Okay, I don't want this. So in the configuration, you can see if my URL is slash login, load the login.html. So it will open the login.html. Right here, if you see it in the login.html, I have only the user text box, password and the button to login. Right here I can give the user text box, admin and login. Whenever I click on login, what it will do is in the controller I have written click on login, I'm making the HTTP request to this particular URL and I'm passing the user ID and the password, so that will be validated. That will be validated. I have stored the user ID password in the MongoDB, that will be validated on the node server, then it will give the response. If the response is 200, that is we mean success, then I'm redirecting the page to the home. So if the URL becomes home, what will happen is in the configuration I mentioned, it needs to load home.html. So it will load the home.html. The home.html I have nothing but just the nav bus, another route. I don't have anything else. Next, in the home.js, what I'm doing, I define the normal JS, nothing. Again, in the configuration, I mentioned the child configurations like home.child and home.create. So whenever it becomes home, it will become home.list. In the home.list, if you see, I will be having only one ng repeat. So this will be having order by, filter, search, whatever you want to do, everything we can do it in the AngularJS here itself. So you don't need to do any other order by on the backend. Using the order by filter, you can do the order by, or using the search filter, you can do implement the search. And in the JS, what I'm doing is, whenever I'm coming from the backend, whenever I load this, I will make a call to the node server. I'll be able to get all the user list from the database. Then I will display it. If I click on remove button, I will send the data to the node server. The node server will remove from the MongoDB. So I have implemented all the functionalities in this list. Next, I have one more file called create. So in the create, I have a user creation page. I will be getting all the user information. In the JS, I will pass this information to the node server, which saves the data. Okay, this is what the code walkthrough. Let's go to the application. Now you can see it over here in the list. I have a two user information that will be displayed right here. Now if you want to add another one, click on the create tab. This will become a create. The configuration will load the create.html. Here you can give the information. So edu1, last name will be J. So I have to mention all the things. XXX 17. So just sign up. Okay. Oh man, it's giving a password and confirm password is not matched because you have to give the same thing. So it is, I think so, missed. So let me give the same password. Okay, done. Sign up. Okay, now we have saved this information successfully. I created one more user called edu1. If you see it in the list page, the edu1 also will be available. So this is coming from the database. And if you want to sort it, just you can click on the name, automatically that will sort the information. Okay, and one more thing is we have this remove functionality. What it will do is whenever I click on this, it will make a call to the backend and it will remove the data. So if you refresh it, the data won't be available. In the same way, what happens is whenever I click on this remove, it is making a node server call, node deletes from the MongoDB. So we can build the end-to-end application. So whenever I click on sign out, I clear the session, I will go out of this login. So we can build end-to-end application in Node.js and AngularJS with MongoDB using this particular stack. Okay, so let's go to the next PPT slide. So we have created our first program and we have seen the demo of our user management system also. Next one is takeaway. So what are all the things we have seen? Today we were discussing about what is AngularJS, and we discussed some of the features of AngularJS like a two-way binding, custom directives and other stuff. Next we are discussing about what does it mean by single page application, then MVC and MVW framework. These are all the things we discussed, and we'll be having our knowledge for this. Next, so if you want to know more in-depth knowledge about this AngularJS, all these custom directives, how can I build my own custom directive, or how can I configure the complex routings, parallel views? So these are all the things we'll be covering it in our AngularJS session. So we are offering AngularJS course on our Edureka. It starts from October 10th. So each and every weekend, like a Saturday and a Sunday, we'll be having a 3-hour session. So it will be like 4 or 5 weeks we'll be having for our each and every course. And each and every course is totally 21 hours of time, and in the assignment will be having 20 hours. So each and every course will be having its own assignment. You should be able to complete those assignments, and once the course is completed, you will be able to build a end-to-end application with AngularJS and Node.js. In our course itself, we will be teaching you the basic Node.js using the Express framework and the MongoDB queries and other syntaxes also. Everything will be covered in our AngularJS course. So do you guys have any other questions? We have still 3 more minutes. If you have any other question, please post your questions on the question window. So from Pranab, we have a question. Will you please provide the code base of this user management system? So the code base will be available with our support team, Pranab. So you can send out a mail to support team and you can get this code. Next question from Kamal. What is the difference between a route provider and the location provider? So the normal route provider is our NG router. So whenever we use the NG router, we'll be using the route provider, and using the location provider, what we'll be doing, instead of showing the hashes, you could have seen in the URL, we'll be showing like a #home or something. So instead of showing the hash, we'll be removing it using the HTML5 on this router provider. Next question from Ajay. So Ajay, what is the difference between the URL provider and the state provider? So state provider is to configure your routes, and URL provider is to give if it is not available. If you want to mention some kind of conditions, if it is not available, navigate to this, or if the URL is this one, navigate to this. Like if you want to mention any other conditions, you can give it in the router provider, or if you want to give the straightforward configurations, you can give it in the state providers. From Pranav, we have a question. I observe user management application that is directly taking to the home page URL will display the list page. So actually it is not taking to the home page. Whenever I type the user ID and the password, I clicked on the enter. The user ID and password has been validated. Once it has been validated, next it takes you to the home page. Without logging in, automatically it won't take you to the home page. We have to write those conditions in our client side. If the session is not available, don't take to the home page. So keep it only in the login. Those conditions we can write it in the client side using AngularJS. Let's take a last question from Ravi Prashant. Bower or NPM, which is the best for a front end? So using the Bower, we can install all the client side components. The NPM is only for the server side JavaScript program. Mostly if you ask me, I prefer a Bower component to install all the client side components. Okay. The last question from Srinivas Balaji. What is the cost of this course? So all the information is available in our Edureka site. Please take a look at this Edureka, and mostly tomorrow you will be having this recorded version, and as well as you may get this PPT also. You can visit our Edureka page. And still I I know I didn't answer for many of the questions. You can post your questions to our support team. We'll be able to answer for all the questions, and once the session is over, we'll be able to get this feedback menu. Please give your feedback, that will be help us to improve the session. Once again, thank you very much guys for attending this session.